My wife just stabbed herself. There's no pulse. There's blood all over the place.
That's Kyle Long on the phone to 911 around 4 p.m. October 23rd.
I was working and I heard her, and I went in there to grab her and everything just, I don't feel a pulse.
By the time emergency crews arrived, Rachel was declared dead. Autopsy reports revealing at least 17 stab wounds and defensive wounds on her hands.
A husband calls 911 screaming that his wife just stabbed herself in their bathroom. The victim is a 32-year-old mother covered in blood. But the real nightmare begins when forensics count 17 separate stab wounds on her body. And the man who made that call? Her own husband, a dog groomer who had been losing control for months. Her name was Rachel Long. She was a mother of two. She owned a business she built from nothing, a real storefront on a real street in a small Ohio town. She had two daughters she named after gemstones. She had friends who loved her, clients who relied on her, and a laugh so loud and so distinctly hers that everyone who knew her could pick it out across a room. And she had recently done something that her closest friends described not with concern, but with celebration. She told her husband she was leaving. She wanted a separation. She wanted the next chapter. And by every account, she was ready for it. 4 minutes before that 911 call you just heard, Rachel was texting her friend about what to wear to a rock concert the next night. 4 minutes. That's the distance between a woman planning tomorrow and a husband reporting her death. This is the story of those 4 minutes, of a cover story that couldn't survive a single forensic question, and of the most dangerous thing a woman can do, not staying in a bad marriage, but walking toward the door. You heard Kyle Long's voice on that call. You heard the heavy breathing, the fragmented sentences, the strange steadiness beneath the performance of panic. You heard a dispatcher ask him more than once to attempt CPR on his dying wife, and you heard him deflect, delay, bring up the school bus instead. But here's what the 911 audio can't show you. What was happening inside that call is only half the story. The other half is what investigators found when they arrived at the house, what the autopsy revealed about Rachel's body, and what the digital records exposed about the timeline Kyle Long never wanted anyone to reconstruct. So let's start with what responders walked into. The Long residence sits on the 2100 block of State Route 187, just outside London, Ohio, a small city of about 10,000 people roughly 30 miles west of Columbus. It's the kind of place where a pet groomer with a downtown storefront is known by name, where the school bus route is the rhythm of the afternoon, where neighbors notice things. EMTs arrived within minutes of Kyle's call. Rachel was in the master bathroom. She was on the floor near the toilet, lying in a pool of blood so extensive it had spread across the tile in every direction and soaked entirely through her clothing. Not stained, saturated. A large kitchen knife rested on the floor to her right. Next to it, wadded clumps of paper towel and toilet paper sat in the pooling blood, as if someone had made a brief, half-hearted attempt to manage what could not be managed and then abandoned the effort. Rachel Long had sustained a minimum of 17 sharp force injuries: her face, her neck, both arms, both hands. She was pronounced dead at the scene. She was 32 years old. Investigators moved immediately. Kyle was directed to remove every article of clothing, each piece collected and tagged for DNA analysis. His body was examined and photographed for injuries. Then, he was driven to the Madison County Sheriff's Office, where detectives were waiting. And Kyle talked. He told them Rachel had come home from work that afternoon at her grooming business. She'd gone to the master bedroom area. He was at his desk working, he said, when he heard sounds, laughing first, then screaming. When he looked into the bathroom, he claimed he saw Rachel stabbing herself in the face and neck. Then, he offered something detectives hadn't asked for. Rachel, he said, wanted a separation from their marriage. He volunteered this detail himself, freely, as if it explained the scene. as if a woman wanting to leave her husband was a reason she might drive a kitchen knife into her own face 17 times while her children rode a school bus home. What Kyle apparently did not understand is that he had just handed investigators the single piece they needed most. They had a body, they had a crime scene, they had a cover story that strained credulity, and now they had a motive, delivered unprompted by the only other person in the house. Sheriff John Swaney would later put it simply, "Ever since we responded to the residents up there, we investigated this as suspicious from the beginning. Mr. Long was the only person in the residence." They never believed Kyle Long's story, not for 1 hour of one day. They just needed 4 months to prove what they already suspected. But before we follow the evidence that dismantled his account, piece by piece, forensic finding by forensic finding, you need to know who Rachel Long actually was. Not a case number, not a victim, a woman in full motion, at the exact moment she was finally becoming free. Rachel Marie Brown was born on December 22, 1992, in Columbus, Ohio, the daughter of Susan Brown and the late William Brown. She graduated from London High School in 2011, married Kyle Long in 2015, and somewhere in between did the thing most people spend their lives talking about and never actually do. She started a business. Perfect Pups Grooming and Boarding opened at 99 West 2nd Street in downtown London around 2017. A real storefront, a real sign with her name attached to the reputation behind it. Rachel groomed dogs, boarded them, competed in grooming competitions, and poured herself into the work with the kind of energy that turned first-time clients into regulars and regulars into friends. But her relationship with animals went far beyond what happened inside those walls. She fostered rescue dogs, took in the ones nobody wanted, and found them somewhere to belong. She had 2 dogs of her own, Autumn and Clifford, and a household that operated with the joyful chaos of a woman who could never say no to a creature in need. She was an avid reader. She loved rock concerts, not gentle, seated-in-the-balcony shows, but heavy, bone-rattling rock where the bass moves through the floor and into your ribcage. She played it through the speakers at work until every one of her co-workers was converted. Her friend and co-worker Madison Myers would later stand at a candlelight vigil and say, "She introduced us to heavy rock that we are very much into now, and I will keep jamming out because I love it now because of her." And there was the laugh. Everyone who knew Rachel mentions the laugh. It was loud and unmistakable, and entirely, irreplaceably hers. The kind of sound you could locate across a crowded room without looking. The kind that made other people start smiling before they even knew why. One of her signature things was her laugh, Myers said, and it was amazing. Anybody who knew her knows what I'm talking about, and we will miss that a lot. She named her 2 daughters Ruby and Scarlet, both gemstone colors, both names chosen by a woman who wanted her children to carry something vivid and luminous out into the world. Rachel lost her father before she lost her own life. She carried that grief alongside everything else, the business, the motherhood, the marriage that was ending, and she kept building anyway. Because here's the thing about Rachel Long that matters most, the thing that makes this case something more than a forensic exercise. In the weeks and months before October 23rd, the people who loved her didn't see a woman unraveling, they saw the opposite. They saw someone waking up. Rachel had told Kyle she wanted out, and rather than collapsing under the weight of that decision, she was expanding into it, making plans, making new friends, looking ahead with the kind of energy her inner circle hadn't seen in years. Her best friend, Brittany Maddox, put it in words that land like a verdict. We knew that she was excited to leave. She was making new relationships and friendships and looking forward to a new adventure as a solo single mom. Excited. Not resigned, not frightened. Excited. Rachel Long was the person in that marriage with the business, the community, the identity, the forward momentum. She was the anchor, the one whose name people in London, Ohio recognized, the one who had something to show for the years she invested in building a life. and she was pulling free. What the investigation would eventually establish is that someone in that household could not tolerate Rachel's departure, but it wasn't Rachel who couldn't survive the separation. The Montgomery County Coroner's Office completed Rachel's autopsy, and the findings collapsed Kyle's account with the precision of a controlled demolition, each result removing another load-bearing wall from a story that was never built to hold weight. Cause of death: multiple sharp force injuries. Minimum wound count: 17, distributed across her face, her neck, both arms, and both hands. The pathologist flagged the injuries on Rachel's hands, left and right, as defensive wounds. In forensic pathology, that classification is specific and carries exactly one meaning. These were injuries sustained by a person grabbing at a blade, deflecting strikes, shielding her face and throat from an attacker. They are the marks of a woman who fought back, a woman who did not want to die, a woman who resisted with everything she had. Then there was the finding that standing alone shatters the entire framework of Kyle's claim. Rachel had a wound on her right arm. Kyle had told investigators, specifically, clearly, that Rachel held the knife in her right hand only. But if you are gripping a knife in your right hand, you cannot stab your own right arm. The angle doesn't work, the reach doesn't work, the fundamental mechanics of the human body do not permit it. That wound on that arm made the self-inflicted story a physical impossibility. And the autopsy noted one more absence that speaks as loudly as anything it found. In cases of genuine self-inflicted knife injury, forensic pathologists expect to find hesitation wounds, shallow, tentative cuts that reflect the body's overwhelming, near-unbreakable resistance to harming itself. Even in the most determined suicides involving sharp instruments, the body hesitates, it flinches, it tries and pulls back and tries again shallower. The psychological barrier to driving a blade into your own flesh is immense, and it leaves physical evidence. Rachel had no hesitation wounds, none. What she had were 17 deep, forceful, committed injuries concentrated on her face and neck, the specific regions of the body most commonly targeted in what forensic experts classify as rage-driven interpersonal violence. Not self-harm, not despair, rage. Directed outward, not inward, at a person, not by a person. The Montgomery County Coroner's Office changed the manner of death to homicide. Kyle's suicide story didn't just have cracks, it had no foundation. But the physical evidence from Rachel's body was only the first pillar of the case. The house itself was about to testify. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation sent a team to the Long residence and conducted a comprehensive 360-degree scan of the home, a spatial reconstruction technology that captures every surface, every angle, every sightline with geometric precision. The scan doesn't interpret evidence, it records reality. And reality had a story to tell that directly contradicted the one Kyle Long had been selling. The scan identified physical evidence throughout the bathroom and adjacent areas that investigators described as indicative of a struggle between individuals, not a woman alone with a knife in a bathroom. Two people in violent physical contact, the kind of contact that leaves marks on walls, displaces objects, and creates a scene that looks nothing like a solitary act of self-destruction. Then investigators did something methodical and quietly devastating. They tested Kyle's own words against the geometry of his house. On the 911 call, Kyle placed himself at his desk in the master bedroom when he heard Rachel. But when deputies arrived at the residence minutes later, the same afternoon, before any formal interview, before any attorney was present, Kyle told them something different. He said he'd been watching television in another room. Two locations, given voluntarily within roughly an hour of each other. His story had shifted before anyone pushed on it, before anyone challenged a single detail. His account was already contradicting itself while Rachel's blood was still pooling on the bathroom tile. Investigators mapped both claimed positions against the floor plan. From the desk in the master bedroom, the line of sight to the master bathroom and walk-in closet was obstructed by walls and door frames. From the television area in the other room, the line of sight was also obstructed. Neither position, not the first one Kyle offered, not the second, permitted him to see what he described seeing. Kyle Long told investigators he watched his wife stab herself. The architecture of his own home made that impossible from every location he provided. He wasn't describing what he saw, he was building a scene that needed an eyewitness, and he cast himself in the role. But the walls wouldn't cooperate, the door frames wouldn't bend. The house told the truth, even when its owner wouldn't. When detectives brought Kyle in for a second interview, his statements diverged further, not just from his original account, but from the physical evidence itself. The contradictions were not subtle or ambiguous, they were structural, foundational, the kind that don't come from a confused man misremembering details under stress, the kind that come from a man trying to maintain a fiction that the facts keep dismantling. But the piece of evidence that transformed this case, the one that moves it from a dismantled cover story into something that sits in your chest and doesn't leave, came from the digital records. Investigators obtained search warrant returns from Amazon, iCloud, and email accounts belonging to both Kyle and Rachel Long. A forensic analyst rebuilt the electronic timeline of October 23rd, mapping every call, every text, every digital event against the clock. What they found was a ghost in the phone records, a call Kyle Long never mentioned. Before the 911 call that reached the dispatcher, the one you heard at the beginning of this video, Kyle's phone had placed an earlier call to 911. It either failed to connect or was deliberately ended before it went through. Kyle did not disclose this call during his first interview with detectives. He did not disclose it during the second interview. He never acknowledged its existence at all. It surfaced only because investigators subpoenaed the phone records and a digital analyst rebuilt the timeline entry by entry. Now the sequence comes into focus, and this is the part of the story that changes everything. Rachel's last text message to her friend Madison Myers, the one about the concert outfit, about what to wear tomorrow night, about looking forward to a heavy music evening with friends, was sent approximately 4 minutes before that first, hidden 911 call. Followed the timeline. Rachel texted her friend about a concert. She was thinking about music and outfits and tomorrow. She was alive and planning and hopeful. Then something happened inside that house. Then a 911 call was placed from Kyle's phone and terminated before it connected. Then 4 minutes of absolute silence. No calls, no texts, no digital activity from either phone. Then the second call went through, and Kyle Long told the dispatcher his wife had stabbed herself 17 times. 4 minutes. Hold that duration in your mind. Count it. 4 minutes is the length of a song on the radio. It's how long the coffee takes to brew. It's the space between 2 traffic lights on your evening commute. It is also on a bathroom floor with 17 wounds and blood spreading across tile, an eternity. Investigators have raised a possibility that is nearly impossible to sit with. Rachel Long may not have been dead when that first call was placed. She may have still been breathing, still moving, still conscious on that floor. Those 4 minutes may represent a waiting period, a space between the violence and the moment Kyle Long decided his wife was sufficiently gone to begin performing the story he needed the world to believe. And there's one more possibility, the one that follows you home and sits beside you in the dark. Rachel herself may have tried to call 911. She may have reached for Kyle's phone or her own and tried to dial for help, and he may have ended that call before it connected. We do not know what happened in those 4 minutes. They remain a locked room at the center of this case. No one has produced the key. What we do know is that a woman was texting about a concert outfit, and within minutes, someone placed a 911 call and stopped it, and 4 minutes after that, her husband was on the line telling a story that the autopsy, the crime scene, the sight lines, the scan, and the digital timeline would all prove could not be true. Those 4 minutes are the distance between Rachel's last moment of hope and the first syllable of the lie designed to erase her. And remember, while those 4 minutes passed, 2 little girls named Ruby and Scarlett were on a school bus bouncing along a road towards home. 20 minutes away from walking through the front door. Kyle mentioned that bus on the 911 call. He mentioned it more than once. If investigators are right about what happened in that house, the school bus wasn't a worry. It was a countdown, a deadline he hadn't anticipated, a clock ticking on a scene he hadn't finished staging, set by two daughters who would never see their mother alive again. For 4 months after Rachel died, Kyle Long walked free. Rachel was buried on October 28, 2025, at Cypress Church in London, 5 days after her death. The obituary listed Kyle as her surviving husband. It described Pawfect pups, her love of animals, her passion for reading and concerts. It named Ruby and Scarlett, and it noted, in a detail that now reads differently than it did at the time, that Rachel's business would continue operating with the help of Ashley and Mackenzie, Kyle's own sisters. Those 4 months were not idle. The Madison County Sheriff's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation built their case with the deliberate patience of people who understood that getting it right mattered more than getting it done. They pulled digital records. They completed the spatial reconstruction. They conducted the second interview and documented each contradiction against the physical evidence. They spoke with Rachel's friends and established, beyond any reasonable question, her state of mind in the hours before her death. She was not suicidal. She was not angry. She was not in crisis. She was texting about a concert outfit. And while the system worked, the women who loved Rachel held the line. Brittany Maddox spoke publicly and often. She told reporters that Rachel had never been suicidal, never been depressed, had been excited about the future with a kind of energy that everyone around her could feel. Rachel was excited on where she was headed with the next chapter in her life, Maddox said. She was never a sad or suicidal person. She was not depressed. It just didn't make any sense. It just didn't add up for any of us. Friends organized. They advocated. They kept Rachel's name in the air during the months when the investigation ran silent, and it would have been easy for a small-town case to quietly fade. A group of women, Mackenzie Perez, Desiree Long, Ashley Long, Madison Myers, Ashley Wolverton, and Maddox herself, refused to let that happen. On March 4, 2026, during a routine traffic stop, Kyle Foster Long was placed under arrest and charged with murder. That evening, in the cold, early March air, several dozen people gathered inside the gazebo at Cowling Park in London. Some wore purple and black, Rachel's favorite colors. Someone brought speakers and played the heavy rock music she had loved, the music that rattled teeth and shook floors, the music she had spent years getting everyone around her hooked on. People swayed and held candles and wiped their eyes and laughed because Rachel would have wanted the laughter. She always wanted the laughter. Even in the worst of it, she'd wanted people to hear her laugh. Then Kyle's sister Desiree stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "Rachel, we love you, we miss you, and we will not stop speaking your name." His sister, standing at a vigil for the woman prosecutors say her brother killed, not defending Kyle, honoring Rachel. His other sister, Mackenzie Perez, who now helps run Pawfect Pups, keeping Rachel's business alive on West 2nd Street, spoke about Rachel's devotion to her daughters, about the strength it takes to build what she built, about who Rachel was when no one was watching and no cameras were rolling. These are Kyle Long's own siblings, and they chose Rachel. In all the weeks since the arrest, the news reports, the social media coverage, the courtroom appearances, the national headlines, not a single person has come forward publicly to defend Kyle Long. Not a friend, not a neighbor, not a former colleague, not one member of his own family. His attorney speaks for him. The rest is silence. and in a town small enough that everyone knew Rachel's laugh, knew where her shop was, knew what music she played too loud through the speakers on a Tuesday afternoon, that silence carries weight. It is its own testimony, delivered without a courtroom, without a jury, by the people who knew them both and chose whose name to keep saying out loud. On March 12, 2026, a Madison County grand jury returned a 2-count indictment against Kyle Long, 1 count of murder and 1 count of aggravated murder. The escalation from the original single charge matters. Aggravated murder in Ohio carries the possibility of life without parole. On March 23, 2026, Kyle Long stood in the Madison County Court of Common Pleas and entered a plea of not guilty to both counts. His bond remains at $1.5 million. He is held at the Tri-County Regional Jail. His attorney, Sam Szymanski, has maintained his client's innocence throughout. He has continuously maintained he did not cause her death, and he maintains that today, Szymanski told reporters. It's a horrible, tragic event for which he bears no responsibility, only sorrow. The defense has not offered a public alternative explanation for Rachel's 17 wounds. No other suspect has been named. No other person was in the home. The defensive injuries on both hands, the right arm wound that negates the right hand claim, the evidence of a 2-person struggle, the sightlines that prove Kyle could not have seen what he described, the 2 contradictory locations given on the same afternoon, the undisclosed first 911 call, and the 4-minute gap between Rachel's last text and the call that reported her death, none of these have been publicly addressed by the defense. A trial will determine legal guilt. A jury will weigh the evidence. That process will unfold.